voix ou c'est choix nous.
Tu voz es nuestra elección.
Ta voix, c'est notre choix.
The voice of Florida.
La voz de la Florida.
Your voice is our choice with Dr. Karen Green.
Good morning and welcome back to another week of our program, The Voice of Florida, where your voice is our choice. I am so blessed today to have with me two special guests. This is going to be a wonderful program this week. And first, let me just welcome you back to our program. You know, there's so much happening in the state of Florida and across the country. And this morning, I wanted us to have, you know, how I am with a straight talk or straight conversation of what's happening and how things are actually affecting our state and this country as it is. You know that Florida is now not only the home of our political third border, but also the third border for these United States. And so much is happening here in Florida. Unlike other places, the world knows today is the first day of fall officially, where we get to have an experience of weather changing. But right here in Florida, where everything happens to our south, there is still hurricane season, something in the Gulf that we could probably very well experience in the United States. So it's one of those times Florida gets the tail end and the front end and all kind of ends and beginnings, we hope, for this political cycle. This morning, I am more concerned with what we've been seeing in the news. And as you all know, my viewers and folks who watch this program, Florida is one of the most diverse states. And here in Florida, we have one of the largest communities, population of immigrants in this country. This has happened in the last 3 decades. Prior to that, the last 5 decades, folks were coming to the state, in some instances from Central and South America, some coming here for refuge, some just getting here because of economic choices, and just to experience the American dream. One of our neighboring nations is the island of Haiti. And today we're going to spend some time talking about Haiti. But before we even get there, my first guest this morning is my dear friend, Dr. Paul Vasquez, who happens to be not only a scholar, but one who has served our nation in the military, one who continues to educate our students at a different level here in the state of Florida, one who is versed in political science, international relations, and more importantly, just human rights. And I just want to welcome you, Paul, to this show. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Voice of Florida. I know I'm going to give you an opportunity to just introduce yourself as well without my short bounce on your bio, which is just so unique. A graduate of Notre Dame. I mean, we're in good company today. So when I need political guidance and an air of wisdom, I touch and refer to this genius of a friend in this regard. Thank you, Paul. Welcome to The Voice of Florida. How are you?
Thanks, Karen. It's nice to speak to you today. I'm doing well, thanks. And thanks for the very kind and generous words. So,
well, you know, so much is happening. I know we want to just touch on in our economic space, the academia, what's happening in Florida, and more so within our educators. There's so many people affected by the changes in our country, particularly in the state of Florida, where there are professionals who are literally leaving, teachers, doctors, for different reasons, are leaving. And I know that there is also the challenge of students and their student loans and all the things we could talk about for literacy and higher education. But this morning, I'd love for you to just, with your experience, just tell me what your thoughts are and what is currently happening with our neighboring Haiti. Last night, the president of Kenya visited Haiti to look at what was going on with the negotiations of sharing just the fact that they're part of the African Alliance, how they were going to help with the crisis, political unrest, and just redevelopment in that country for security. Tell me, what are your thoughts?
Sure. Well, I would say it's, part of the reason we're having, part of the reason like Haiti got into the presidential political dialogue, right, involving migrants that are living in places like Ohio, is because we've had in recent years, and not just recent, but especially recent years, large numbers of people fleeing the island of Haiti. And a lot of scholars, people that have studied Haiti for a long time, I'm not a Haitian expert, but a lot of scholars who've studied it and people who've served there as ambassadors kind of consider Haiti to be a failing state, where there's not a government that's viewed as being totally legitimate, and B, on top of that, they don't have what most people would think is important to have a state, which is an organization that has a monopoly. And Haiti has unfortunately a substantial history of having gangs that have been connected politically to different political leaders. This is something that's gone back decades. Some of those gangs have been financed by political elites in the country. And so, at least for people in the United States, I think a lot of times we don't pay as much attention to the dynamics going on within countries as we probably should until something starts to happen that involves either substantial bloodshed in the country or violence, or in the cases of what we've seen from Haiti, processes that have moved people to pick up and move from their homeland to an entirely different land because circumstances are difficult in their home countries. And so I think some of that explains, the dynamics coming from Haiti, and even countries too, like, Mexico and other countries further down in Central America. There's been instability in those countries, and it's not just all political violence. Sometimes there's economic deprivation too, and of course Haiti is, the poorest country in the hemisphere. But it's not like problems in Haiti are new. I remember way back in the 1990s, in the early 90s, when people were leaving Haiti, and it was actually an issue in the presidential election back in 1992 when President Clinton was running, or when candidate Bill Clinton was running against President George W. Bush, because way back then, the administration was concerned about an influx of Haitian refugees and people taking to the high seas and drowning in relatively rickety boats. Their policy was to discourage that and to send people back because they didn't want to reward people taking this huge risk, being criticized by the Clinton administration for that. But then shortly after kind of the Clinton administration came in, they actually backtracked in terms of being, trying to be as encouraging of people to come here, because there were rickety boats that were, going down and large numbers of people were drowning. And so my only point here is this has been an issue that's raised its head at times and gone away for a little while as far as presidential politics is concerned, but it's back now, and we heard the unsubstantiated rumors, about Haitian immigrants to the U.S. and eating pets and stuff like that, which has been debunked. I think there might have been. I think the origin of this, if I understand it right, was that there was a woman who reported her cat missing, and came to find out the cat was in her basement, and her suspicions about her immigrant neighbors were unfounded. But people take these kinds of things, run with them. They try to use them for political advantage to kind of win political points. And the downside of doing that, there might be people out there in social media right, that can put that kind of stuff out there and not get pushback. But when you have people from the media that go out and talk to mayors, talk to city managers, when you have the governor of Ohio rebuking these kinds of assertions, when you have religious leaders like the Catholic bishops in Ohio who just recently came out and were vocal and issued a statement about, spreading rumors about immigrants that weren't true and xenophobia, this kind of thing rears its head.
Well, Paul, let me interject for a moment. You're right.
Yeah,
you're right that Haiti has long succumbed to this kind of deprivation, and to some extent, it is one of those nations, the first independent colonized nation, in my opinion, when Toussaint basically fought his way into freedom and that liberation that came from France. It is historic for people from this part of the hemisphere to have seen that. Other nations followed, like my own birthland, Jamaica, where we had emancipation as well, having fought, and the same kind of anti-colonial, the folks who stood up to these horrible people. And so for that independent role back in the 18th century is what has caused this kind of severance, because it was one of those nations that France governed up until that time. And then ever since then, Haitians had to basically put themselves in debt. You mentioned just the fact that they were the most indigent within our region, with poverty because of the debt they had been paying to France for generations. So just to fast forward on something you said, the 70s is when I think we started to have this migration of folks trying to come into the United States, the both folks coming from Haiti, preceding that it was the Cubans coming from Cuba back in the 60s with the same transition, to come over. But let me say this, that I believe, based on history, that America has people who see themselves as more American, let's just be blunt, because all of us are immigrants in this country, right? But I remember, just based on my study, that you mentioned the 30s, that there was a time that every immigrant group, those who were here after the Indians were sanctioned, basically owned America. They did the same thing to the Germans when they were coming in. They did the same things to the Irish when they were coming in. And they created these rumors. Even it reminds me of this kind of propaganda, because it's the weakest link. If you think about it, Haitians are the last of the mass immigrants coming into the United States. Let us be clear, right? Haitians within the last 4 decades, this is the last group of a nation. And Haitians are not just coming here for one reason, to be away from political asylum, but keep in mind that the geographic, environmental, earth-warming crisis that has hit Haiti, and it is because of the economic and the infrastructural disadvantage they have. The structural houses, because let's face it, these mass category 5 hurricanes have been coming to the entire Caribbean, right? Other nations have been hit, but Haiti has not been able to survive, to rebuild, because of the infrastructure and the fact that they don't have the resources there to do it. And keep in mind, also, we're talking about earthquake that forced these people to come to this country. And so I am a little passionate about this, because over the decades, I've come to know a lot of Haitians. And Haitians, like most people coming to these United States within the last 6 decades to America, came here because of economic choices. One of the American dream of better life. And in some cases, many of them would go back home. Unlike other immigrants, that's one of the criteria I think people need to ask when people are coming in. If you had a choice to be in your own country, what would keep you there? Is it the safety of your life, or is it the sanctity of your survival, or is it for economic achievement or educational achievement, which brings me to your topic. Because Florida is also one of the most, people don't realize this, like we go back again, 30 years ago, people were coming to Florida for the sunshine. It was a senior citizen retirement retreat until they can no longer afford housing and insurance and housing. We'll get to that another time. But now Florida is one of the most, we have the most educational institutions. We have some of the most colleges in the state of Florida. People who are coming here no longer come here to retire, they come here to study. Right, Professor? And you were an educator at the University of Central Florida, one of the largest colleges in Florida, for almost 17 years, if I can recall. So tell me, what is your take on where we are with higher education, with learning, or scholars, and more so our professors? Where are we?
Sure. Do you mind if I actually circle back to Haiti for just a minute before moving on to that other topic? Is that okay?
Please.
Yeah. So I was just going to mention, I think one thing that kind of people in the United States who maybe aren't as familiar with the Caribbean need to be mindful of is like one of the advantages that we have of living in such a large country, right? Because I think this speaks in some measure partially to the poverty issue, because when you're in a small country, your economy is inherently not as diversified. If you're in a larger country, you may have minerals, you may have great agricultural land, you may have great rivers, that you can take advantage of. And just by having a larger country, if you're a smaller country and you have an earthquake, you get hit by climate problems like hurricanes, when you talk about investment, financial investment, people talk about diversify your portfolio, right? That's how you manage risks. But small countries can't inherently do that as easily, right? Especially if you have like one or maybe just two primarily cash crops. If for some reason you have a glut in that commodity or whatever, some of these things may not always apply specifically to the Haitian case. But just small states in general compared to the United States, they don't have oftentimes the economic wherewithal that comes from being a larger, more diversified state with a larger number of economic sectors that you can pull from. And, that's a big problem, not only for countries like Haiti, but other small countries in particular. So if you don't have those economic resources, when you have earthquakes, when you have climate disasters, in the U.S., right? Think about it. If all we had was the state of Florida, if the state of Florida was an autonomous country, and we couldn't rely on the economic wherewithal of people in New York or California or Illinois or other places, our emergency response, our rebuilding response after hurricanes would be dramatically diminished, right? And so I think it's important for us to kind of keep in mind that there are some inherent challenges that small countries like Haiti have. But so I guess just one other thing I would add is just based on the proximity that you mentioned, there have been some studies done about problems fueling the political violence on the island. And a lot of that has to do with guns that have been trafficked from the United States, not exclusively from the United States, but the United States is a country from which many guns are smuggled and trafficked into Haiti. And there's actually kind of a historical precedent for that. But did you want to say something?
Yeah, so I'm also saying to you that one of the things that Haiti is, and you're right, thank you for bringing us back to this space. But let us, one of the unique things about Haiti, unlike other countries in the Caribbean, is that Haiti also has a border with the DR, which uniquely, historically, we had two colonizing countries that were literally owning the Caribbean region because of agriculture, so either sugarcane or whatever it was they would find, slavery and or cane at the time before coconuts, was the Dominican Republic, right next to Haiti, also has a border. And it is amazing to think that that border that they've experienced is a fine line of the have and the have-nots. There is literally a sunshine tropical paradise and a flea market at the border when it's time to sell merchant. And it is so horrible. It reminds me, and it's probably the closest comparison to what is happening in Gaza and Israel. Let me just be clear, we'll touch it another time. But I can say to you that for me and the folks who are living in that region, this is what they're experiencing. They're experiencing where, as I mentioned before, climate change is real. The infrastructure, because of hardship in Haiti, they have the same soil, but the soil is deprived and having to be minded. And they have the same water shores, the beaches in Haiti, Labadee, those of you who are familiar with going to private islands, folks don't seem to understand that the beauty of Haiti is such a beautiful place. Another thing that we also need to remember that within the last 100 years, one of Haiti's prime exports was their scholars. And these folks would be, and that was also a reflection of the wealth in Haiti, that those people who were either people who would study in Spain were people who were of an affluent society. People who would study in France were those who were basically able to afford study. And then those who would go to Canada eventually for employment and or otherwise. So Haiti's culture, and then let us not forget what Haitians did in Boston. The development of Boston, which as you know is the home of scholars in this country, Cambridge and MIT and all this. It is amazing that a society that is now recognized as the least literate in the region to this day has so many brilliant people outside of that country, and even there, unable to practice their skill or their trade without any rewards. So it is, every time we talk about, I think what is happening now in the United States because of this anti-immigration regime, which we will talk about. You and I are I just got a text from, I didn't want us to have this conversation speaking about Haiti without an active Haitian to interact with us on this call this morning. And I've just been informed that our guest who was coming in because of what is happening in Haiti. I mentioned to you before that, the Kenyan president was there yesterday. There are a lot of changes. And then he is one of those who's a humanitarian to Haiti, a translator, one who is, we will get to meet him. I'm hoping he still gets to jump on the call. But I just got a call from him. He's running late for all these reasons, wanting to do recruitment and otherwise. As you know, we typically take a break during this program, which will be coming up in a few minutes. But this conversation is so real. I couldn't be more secured speaking to Dr. Vasquez, who happens to be a political scientist in most ways, a humble guy. You would honestly a big fella, but if you need to know what needs to happen in any era projectedly or just where things are. You mentioned earlier the fact that the governor, who happens to be a Republican in the state of Ohio, the mayor in this district are also Republicans. The fear and the threat of what is happening in a state that needed this kind of industrial support, that needed people who are there in right now in Springfield are helping to rebuild like it was after the Great Depression, because that's what happened in Springfield. There was a mass depression of development and economic achievement. There was nothing happening. And because during this time of this administration, companies and manufacturing in America is starting to boom again, and the opportunity for these people to find work is why they're there. We have about 2 minutes before we move into our break. Chime in on this, please, Paul, before we move into our break cycle.
Sure. Well, just the one thing I would just go back to that I was mentioning was kind of, how, because there's certainly an economic component to the migration. There's also the violence component. And one thing that I think it doesn't just apply to Haiti, but also countries like Mexico is typically a lot of the sources of weapons for some of those countries. Most of them don't have, either they have very strict gun laws or they don't have an indigenous weapons manufacturing base. But in many cases, lax gun laws in the United States make it easy for people to purchase large numbers of guns here and smuggle them into places like Mexico or into Haiti. And like, there's actually I have an unnatural amount of history in Cuba in the Spanish-American War because of my personal ancestry. And if you look back at the period before what should be called the Cuban Spanish-American War, there were large numbers of guns that were being run illegally from the United States in violation of neutrality law into Cuba, aiding the opposition to the Spanish government. And that kind of kept conflict simmering for several years, like 2 or 3 years before, the US actually got its military involved. But so there's a history.
That history, that after the break, because that to me is where we need to start. This is what's happening in these regions where they're thinking that they're bringing in drugs and guns in from their nations, but in because of these reasons, the poverty and the trafficking of the wealthy and neighboring countries that will actually cause these nations to succumb to this kind of identity. We'll go into our break and we'll continue our conversation with Dr. Vasquez at the back of the break. And we'll be talking about Haiti, and not just Haiti, but how Haiti affects the state of Florida and our Caribbean community, as well as our European communities, and where we are in the state of our state elections, polling and otherwise. Thank you so much.
For 10 years, the Survey of Household Economics and Decision-Making has tracked the economic well-being and financial conditions reported by U.S. adults and their families. The survey collects data on how people feel about their family's finances to help understand the effects of broader economic trends over time. Conducted in October 2022, the latest survey reveals that 73% of adults were doing at least okay financially, meaning they reported either doing okay or living comfortably. The share of adults doing at least okay financially in 2022 was down 5 percentage points from 2021 and was among the lowest observed since 2016. This decline in well-being aligns with broader economic conditions during fall 2022, including inflation and stock market declines. In economically challenging times, relatively small, unexpected expenses such as a car repair or a modest medical bill can be a hardship for many families. When faced with a hypothetical expense of $400, 63% of all adults in 2022 said they would have covered it exclusively using cash, savings, or a credit card paid off at the next statement, referred to altogether as cash or its equivalent. The share who would pay using cash or its equivalent was down 5 percentage points from 2021 and back at its 2019 level. Consistent with widespread experience of higher prices in the prior year, most adults said that price increases had affected their family budget. Adults with incomes under $100,000 were more likely to say their family budget was affected a lot by rising prices, compared to adults with higher incomes. Black and Hispanic adults, parents living with children under 18, and those with a disability were also more likely to indicate that their budget had been affected a lot by higher prices. Most people took action in response to higher prices, especially through changing spending. The most common adjustments were using less or stopping using products, as well as switching to cheaper alternatives. Just above 1/2 of respondents reduced savings. Increasing borrowing, working more, and asking for a raise were less common strategies. These survey findings provide insight into the wide range of financial opportunities and challenges facing U.S. families at the time of the survey. More information is available in the report on the economic well-being of U.S. households in 2022. To view or download this year's full report and downloadable survey data, visit federalreserve.gov/consumerscommunities/shed.
Hello everybody, welcome back for another Healthy Minute. If you want to boost your brain health, make sure you eat more foods that are packed with omega-3 fatty acids, foods such as salmon and sardines. And if you want to increase your protein content, which is also excellent for your body, add some codfish. Fresh codfish in fact, is low in mercury, high in protein, and has a great number of vitamins and minerals. For this Healthy Minute, I'm Dr. Hafizullah. See you again soon. Thank you for watching. Please remember to click subscribe for the latest videos and updates. See you soon.
Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel. Our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world, all in one place, RTV.network.
The voice of Florida. Your voice is our choice with Dr. Karen Green.
Wow, c'est choix nous.
Welcome back to our second segment in the Voice of Florida for this week, where your voice is your choice. My special guest today is Dr. Paul Vasquez, who is a political scientist. He is a former veteran. And one of the unique things about my brother is that he's a 5-time generation of a Floridian. Literally, well, let me back up. He's what you refer to as a true Floridian, but raised in Georgia. 5 generations of his folks are from Key West. You know, Key West is not really America. You know that, right?
Right.
So Key West falls in the same category space as Cuba and Jamaica. So so Negril and Key West and Havana are within the same category, right? Listen, welcome back, Paul. We were on a very special topic talking about what the influx of weapons and in most cases, even drug trafficking, and in the worst case scenario, even human trafficking, has posed a national security concern for our third border within these islands that have been struggling for economic success. And we touched on that. But let us just be clear, folks, that the average person from a nation like Haiti, a nation like Jamaica, the Bahamas, these are all tropical paradises with brilliant people. And like every other country, America is still, to this day, the most powerful nation in the world, wealthiest nation in the world, most resourceful nation in the world. And that is why most of us here as immigrants are still here. Tell us, Paul, we were picking up on that important topic. Expound, please.
Sure. Well, one thing I think I would just mention is that I think some of the reasons situations like Haiti exist, and you know, there have been persistent problems there, right, with instability and kind of turmoil on the island and abject poverty. And one of the things that I think makes it difficult in the United States to kind of help resolve some of those problems is there's kind of an inherent bias against government spending for different things, right, and especially foreign aid. Oftentimes you'll hear people talk about foreign assistance as if it's useless money that gets wasted, when in fact, like, there's actually a very small amount of our budget goes towards foreign assistance, and especially things that are non-militarily related. And oftentimes the appetite, I think, in Washington for trying to take on efforts to try to help a country like Haiti rebuild, and it would probably take a very substantial investment, gets kind of obscured because people are kind of penny wise and maybe dollar foolish. And they put money. We probably put too much money into too many weapon systems and things like that. Not that I'm opposed to that. I think there's certainly an important role for that. But the attitude towards that foreign assistance is just money that's wasted. People don't get up and leave places like Haiti or Mexico or Guatemala just because they want to. Nobody wants to uproot themselves, I don't think, and move to an entirely different place, especially if they've got kids. They're leaving family behind, all of the travails and risks that go with that. And so, and another thing too is, like we were talking about, weapons trafficking, weapons and other things that are smuggled from the United States. In order for the United States to be able to push back on that kind of thing and do it well, there are resources that are necessary in order to have a vigorous ability to patrol our vast, ocean, Gulf border, essentially, right? I mean, one of the problems that the U.S. ran into in the late 1800s was there was so much coast, and back then it was the revenue cutter service. To try to police all of that was really difficult. And even nowadays, even with our more robust Coast Guard and Department of Homeland Security, when there are people in Washington that are talking about wanting to make the federal government small enough so that they can drown it in a bathtub, like there used to be a guy named Grover Norquist who used to talk about.
Yes. Paul, it's interesting you touch on that, because for so many reasons, the Caribbean, I'm a little sentimental to this piece for more reasons now, right? But right now, my thought is the crisis in Haiti, and I know I might offend a few people, but this is where your voice is my choice. My position here does not reflect my association with any political role that I have. But on this program, I'm exercising my First Amendment, and we're talking because it needs to be said. My thought of Haiti compared to Cuba in the 60s, in the 1950s and 60s, the wet foot, dry foot policy that Cubans have in America, because of a one leader at the time in Fidel Castro, which they saw as communism, right? Here's my position.
Right.
The tragedy and horrible things that happened to Cubans who fled here, we could argue about that for different reasons at a different time. I must say to you now that the comparison to the devastation and the lawlessness that is happening in Haiti, I genuinely believe that this is more deserving or equally deserving of a wet foot, dry foot policy. And I say that because at least we could identify who the leader was or is, or the leader in Cuba is. But part of the problem why Haiti continues to be in this state of economic distress is because there are dictators, there have been gang leaders, there is a mass crime of extortion. You don't know who to trust. And so even the nonprofits who go to Haiti, which is another big part of this problem, that Haiti's, in my opinion, Haiti's new product is indigence. It is poverty. Because everybody who is talking about Haiti talks about it like they spoke about to going to Somalia or back in the days in Biafra. They're talking about Haiti as the poorest, least educated. And so this attracts nonprofits. It not only attracts nonprofits, it attracts nonprofits who pretend to be nonprofits, but in my opinion, are not profiting the people on the island. So we come back to the point, Paul, where we all need to be mindful and humanely sensitive and caring to the people in Haiti, that we know. Those of you who have never been to Haiti, I can tell you I've been there I've been there from a vacation place and from a working space and as an observer space and a helping space. And I can tell you that Haiti and Haitians are proud people too. Proud, beautiful, educated, literate, and those who cannot afford to be educated, they love their families. They're educated to their families. When they get to leave to come to work, everything goes back to help their people at home. And the objective is they want a safe Haiti. They want a Haiti just as you go on vacation to the DR. People you talk to in Haiti want to tell you you need to see your beaches on the coast. So, I'm talking, I know my brother is not here to speak about Haiti today, but I know a lot of Haitians who want, as a matter of fact, let me give this one example. I know of a Haitian lady right now. She's 101 years old. She's a U.S. citizen, but she wanted to go home to Haiti to be at her life-ending state. And she's been there in Haiti because her caregiver for 40 years is there on the island with her and does not have, because of the unrest, she doesn't have a traveling visa. Think about that. People and her children want to be with her. They're all professionals, doctors, lawyers, you name it. The bottom line is people want to go home to a safe nation. So when they come here, like those who came from, what's really interesting, let me just, before I get into it and start talking too much. The ambitious fellow who wants to be vice president, Vance, who happens to be of Irish and Scottish descent, who has been galvanizing the story, needs not to forget what happened to his family. Paul, help me understand this. Please help me. What's your origin? Where did your forefathers come from?
Yeah, so I'm a mutt in a variety of different regards. My last name is Cuban, right? Vasquez, but I have in my family tree, I have a Maggie Murphy. I have Germans, English, you name it. I had some ancestors who actually came from Prussia back in the 1800s when there was a Prussia. But my father's family came from Cuba. They actually came here in the 1860s. They came not fleeing Castro, but fleeing the conflict between the Cuban liberationists and the Spanish government. And there was a big exile community in the United States, probably one of the earliest from the Caribbean, not necessarily the earliest, but cities like Tampa, Ybor City, Key West were primarily because of the conflict and turmoil going on there with the Spanish government and how it was running the island and all of the conflict. And so, they came here. A lot of those early communities were actually cigar communities and they actually kind of came across the Florida Strait because there had been laws that were put in place that levied higher tariffs. We've heard tariffs being discussed in the presidential election, right? There were tariffs that had been lobbied for by U.S. tobacco producers because they didn't want to have to compete against Cuban tobacco or Cuban cigars, let me put it that way. So they put tariffs on Cuban cigars. And then in the context of some of this instability on the island, they figured, well, we can get around the tariff by we will import into Tampa and Key West leaf tobacco, which wouldn't be taxed, wouldn't be tariffed. And you had then migrants that came over here to assemble the cigars, like my grandfather, who was a cigar maker, and do that kind of thing. And, so there were, I think in a lot of people's experience, maybe they don't migrate entirely for security. Maybe it's not entirely for money, but maybe it's, most people have multiple needs, right? And so sometimes these kind of things come together. And I think that was the case for my ancestors.
I see. And so right now we understand, one of the things that I think we all have somewhat seemed to have forgotten, and that's one of the problems we have in this country. We forget things really fast. We forgot what happened after Hurricane Andrew. We forgot what happened after these devastating things. But more importantly, we're forgetting what happened in the world's worst pandemic less than 4 years ago. We're forgetting that the border in Mexico was not just folks coming here from Mexico or from Central and South America, coming here from Ukraine, from everywhere in the world where there was an opportunity to come and live. So there were this wasn't a gold rush, this was a life rush. People were coming over. And let's just think for a moment, right? That a nation like Haiti that not only they're succumbing to because of TPS, which is another big story. They're coming across with legally. They once they get here, they're admitted because of temporary protective service. They're in a legal allowance for them to be here. When they talk about illegal immigrants in Springfield, I heard that last night, Paul, and I know I'm deterring. Hearing that they're illegal, but they're going to find a way to deport them, right? Here's the other interesting piece. Yesterday, the fellow who was the president of these United States, an election denier, a commander of an insurrection, one who is now here suggesting that immigrants they would have a mass deportation. They were also thinking about reversing or naturalization. And one of the worst things he said was about you could be killed, executed. You need to go back. This is not me saying, I'm quoting him, but you can Google it. President Donald Trump, what did he say about execution and deportation and mass deportations? To me, this is ridiculous, cruel, horrible. The only kind of talk you heard like that was back in Nazi Germany. And with Mussolini talking about people, they were bringing in diseases and all kind of crazies to create this kind of divide and hate and resentment. We all know people love in America. We love our seniors. We love our pets. We love our boats. And we love our backyards, right?
Right.
And guess what he just did? Now he's telling us that they're going to eat your pets. They're going to kill your seniors. They're going to take away your waterway. This guy is preying on your every emotional need. Your psyche. Paul, what is this?
Well, one thing I would say is So it's concerning to say the least, right? But one thing I would say that I think is like an additional concern is we've seen, just in recent days and weeks, I actually have a friend who lives in the Dayton area, and I emailed him or messaged him a few days back and told him I hoped things weren't crazy up there, and he said they were, and that there were threats coming into schools, and schools were being closed because of bomb threats, and other government offices were being closed. And one of the problems with this kind of thing is, like, when you lift the lid off of this stuff, I think it encourages people to kind of play freelance vigilante or law enforcement officer, right? And when somebody walks down the street, they don't, unless they have a hat on that says I lived in Haiti, right? You don't know that they necessarily lived in Haiti. You might pass somebody on the street of color, and somebody might assume that, well, this person's from Haiti, and they may be wrong. That person may have been from Kenya or Uganda or some other place, and maybe people are just making assumptions about people. And one of the concerns I have, so like my hometown, about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a young man named Ahmaud Arbery who was shot and killed by guys who were essentially kind of playing vigilante because they had seen him around a house that was being built, and they thought he was there to steal things. They took things into their own hands. He ended up being murdered. And it doesn't take a whole lot of creative thinking to imagine how this kind of thing could be repeated by other people who feel empowered to step up and claim authority that they don't have, and act as if they are judge, jury, and executioner. In democracies, we have institutions, we have laws that govern us to do these things through an appropriate process, not just me walking down the street and thinking that somebody, somebody should be here or shouldn't be here. And when people talked about 9/11, they said that 9/11 was possible in the US in part because there was a failure of imagination, that people just could not imagine planes being weaponized and used as weapons of destruction. And I don't think it takes a whole lot of, imagination to imagine people, especially when we already see bomb threats coming into schools and government offices in Ohio, that people, especially in an absence of leadership that is more restrained, more nuanced, more careful, it's not hard to imagine how things could easily spiral out of control and.
Let me interject. This fellow, within the last 2 days, he's actually said he's planning to visit Springfield. And ahead of him was the Proud Boys, his own fanfare vigilantes. Let me say this. Just think, the governor has asked them not to come. The mayor says don't come. The congressional representative said don't come. Why would you want to go to Springfield where these people are already in danger? There's no schools, there's no public meetings, there's no social gatherings. Why would you want to pick up to go there? It tells you that this is just to incite this kind of horrible stuff continuing. I can also say too, Paul, one of the things that also is concerning to me is you just mentioned about 9/11. We're not in that time in the world, right? One of the proposals that Donald Trump, every time he gets on a stage, he keeps telling folks that he's reminding folks that if he doesn't become president, or he's suggesting that he's the one who will stop World War III and it's going to start. I mean, let's just stop for a minute, right? Are we, President Joe Biden went through what I believe was ageism. And because of that last debate, we can understand. I personally am sympathetic because he was going through where his beloved son was dealing with that kind of stress. It could have traumatized any loving parent. And the man he is, it must have been a lot of stress on him. He has been functioning. He's a great guy. But just think for a minute. Here is Donald Trump at 78 years old, not able to hold a full sentence, but is telling us his commitment to us is to be a dictator, to do mass deportation of every immigrant. He's suggesting what should be done with people, how they could be killed, or he would request some kind of special compared to what it was the Gestapo, unknown police. Let us just be clear. Today, we're less than 44 days into this election cycle. And I have to remind folks here in the state of Florida, You have until October 7th to register to vote. Let me repeat that. You have until the 7th of October to register to vote in the state of Florida, and in different counties, different across the state. We're putting up I Will Vote. Thank you, my producer. That where you need to go to I Will Vote, register to vote in a few days. We only have less than 2 weeks, if not exactly right. In some places, voting has already started in some states. I'm encouraging you folks. The unique thing about voting in this election cycle is that if you are an independent who believes in freedom, democracy, and fairness, and to protect the democracy of your children, your grandchildren, if you're a Democrat and you haven't voted in recent cycles, make sure your voting opportunity was not purged. Please check your vote status. If you're a Republican who is disheartened, who has a conscience and is fair to thinking, and is also disappointed and embarrassed of this person who is supposed to be wanting to lead your party again, I am saying today with an appeal to you, not just for myself, but for my children, my grandchildren, and for our parents and grandparents, and for all of you who fought for this great nation, please register to vote. Register to vote as soon as you can. And I know I told everyone when I started this program that it was not going to be a partisan program. But I'm saying to you today from a place of not just faith, but freedom, please use this opportunity to register to vote. We cannot have this happen to us. We've come too far to turn back now. My brother Paul, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I guess there are two thoughts I had. One is, so as for you just, this is more of a passing item, but you mentioned President Biden and the challenges of being a victim of ageism. I think one thing that certainly has hurt him in the debate, as an old high school and college debater, he looked like somebody who had been overly prepped and had his head filled with data that he was looking to put out there. But even beyond that, and beyond the case of involving his son, he and his administration had been trying to keep a lid on the war in Gaza involving Israel and Hamas. And I can only imagine the stress that would take. One of the things I used to teach about was foreign policy decision making, and stress, extended stress, the exposure to countless reports, maybe even images or audio or other kinds of footage of the conflict that's going on there that a commander-in-chief would be receiving on a regular basis, in addition to the other things that were mentioned, would undoubtedly take a toll. But the other thing I would just circle back and add to what you were talking about in terms of a future administration is the Supreme Court just this year has told us that presidents are immune from actions they take while they are in office.
Mm-hmm.
And when you layer that on top of everything you just mentioned, I mean, I think there are people who are concerned are not just extremists or just people who are just on the fringe. I think if you just look at circumstances and look at what's happened and comments that have been made and court decisions that have come down, there are good reasons why people could be concerned.
Well, I can say it, and thank you for bringing that point up. Back in 2016, that was one of the things I kept talking to folks. By the time we wrap up, Supreme Court is on the ballot. Not just reproductive rights is on the ballot. The next president will likely have the opportunity to choose and seat more Supreme Court justices. And so when you're thinking about this, I encourage you to do that as well. I want to thank you again. This has been such a wonderful show, Paul. I'm inviting you back, not just to edify us, but to teach us and to just share your wealth of knowledge with us and the protection of everything you do. Thank you so much for what you do in the state and for all you've done for this country, your service, your family, and your friendship. Before we go, I just want to remind you all, and thank you again for viewing the program. Welcome to the Voice of Florida. Your voice is our choice. I encourage you, please get to your polling locations, get to your supervisor of elections, or go right now to iwillvote.com. iwillvote.com. Make sure your vote is valid and that you can help us to secure this great nation and freedom of this vote. God bless you all. Thank you again for tuning into the Voice of Florida. We look forward to seeing you next time. God bless.
I used to watch BET, MTV, VH1, now I watch Tempo. Soca, Calypso, Reggae Dancehall. Don't stall, better get tuned in to the Tempo. Don't have cable, they got an app. Go to your app store, download that. Whether it's tourism, cuisine, or the social scenes, if it ain't Tempo, it's a rap. Who got the Caribbean views? Tempo. It's the latest in Caribbean news. Tempo. You tryna cook Caribbean food? Tempo. You know they got the music videos too. Tempo. Who got the Caribbean views? Tempo. It's the latest in Caribbean news. Tempo. You tryna cook Caribbean food? Tempo. You know they got the music videos too. Tempo.
Today we're taking a little vacation on the west end of St. Croix, visiting a seaside restaurant called the Beachside Cafe here at Sandcastles on the Beach.
The atmosphere is just wonderful.
You just feel very welcome when you're here.
Hi! I'd like to introduce Chris and Ted, who are the owners of Beachside Cafe and also Sandcastles on the Beach. This is amazing!
Thank you. Sandcastle on the Beach is quiet and friendly, relaxing.
I often entertain guests, and this is the one place I always try to bring people.
Tell us a little bit about the hotel.
Well, the hotel is a 25-room hotel. We have 10 different room types within that. We also have, of course, our greatest asset, the ocean out there, which our side of the island is very calm typically. So it's the best swimming beach and also great for snorkeling.
And just walking, doing a nice walking beach tour.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Best beach access is right here, so we love them.
And we're also fortunate we have just up the way Sandy Point National Park, and then Frederickstead Town is just a mile away. Mm-hmm. And so we're really fortunate to be in this perfect spot.
Welcome to our TV network, your ultimate destination for all things exciting and essential. From mouth-watering food to the latest in fashion, health, education, music, movies, and news, plus thrilling sports and breathtaking travel. Our TV network brings it all to you. Tune in today and experience the best of every world, all in one place.